Welcome to the Afro Storybook, collective wisdom and revelations from Africa and her diaspora. This is part 2, culture, identity, and racial awareness. Hello, my name is Alexandra Loves Aya Iwo-Riosa, and I'm the host of the Afro Storybook. In the last part, we met some of the people I interviewed, and I shared a little bit about my story. When I interviewed my guests for this project, I asked them all the same questions for each subject. In this part, I asked about racial awareness, roots, culture, racial identity. And as you're listening to the storybook, remember that you're just getting a taste of all that they have to share. We could chat for days and days on any subject we touch on in the storybook. Let's hear from Olutosin Oladoshu Adeboala. She said I could call her Olu for short. She's a farmer, artist, facilitator, and teacher from Owu, Ondo State, Nigeria. When I asked her about identity, she immediately shared in terms of a rich history that connects her and the peoples of her area, and then eventually narrows it down to the characteristics of her tribe.
I am from Nigeria. We are tribal people. Nigeria is divided into many tribes. I am from Yoruba part. Yoruba, they are from western part of Nigeria. We speak Yoruba language. We believe that we are from one man called Oduduwa. So you see, the western part of Nigeria, we have about 8 states, and all of us speak variants of one language, Yoruba language. We tie our gele like this. We always have headgear. And we wear Iro and Buba always. It's wrapper, very big wrapper that we tie around. And our Buba is a blouse with very long hands. So we are the only tribe in Nigeria that wear Iro and Buba traditionally. And our men too. Yes, our men traditionally, they wear agbada, very big robe that they can fold and fold and fold and fold. So most of the time we wear Ankara fabrics or we wear lace material. And I think Yoruba people, they are the people who eat pounded yam. We pound our yam into bolos. So traditionally, Yoruba people eat heavy carbohydrate food.
And we'll get back into food in part 5 of the storybook.
Eku. So they call us the Eku people. We are the people who kneel down and prostrate. No other tribe does that. So if I want to greet an elderly person, I will kneel down on both knees as if I want to pray. If a man wants to greet, you have to prostrate and lie flat on the floor. So we are the only tribe who does that in Nigeria. And I think in the world, all our men, when you want to greet an elder, male or female elder, they will lie flat on the ground. Our women will kneel on both knees to greet elders, whether it's a white person, a brown person, as long as you're an elder, we must kneel down to greet. If it is on the road, we can move to the side of the road. And if not, we have to bow. We go down for our elders. We don't stand to greet an elder. It is an abomination.
I noticed that when Olu was talking about her tribe, she never mentioned race in her perception of herself, even though I asked about racial identity. We'll get back into that.
No, the race. No, we don't. I think we love ourselves.
This is Judy Kalunga Kabwele. She's a student of criminology and security services living in Kitui Zombe, Kenya.
And we don't see that because this particular person comes from this village, because of the race. I was saying as Kambas.
The Kambas are the people of Judy's tribe.
Yeah, in my country, we don't discriminate people because of their tribe. We don't discriminate people because of their race. We usually work together as a team on succeeding. We don't discriminate people. When we are describing each other. For example, we have different types of tribes. I think in Kenya, we have many tribes. And you go and find that this tribe likes doing their own things, and the other tribe, for example, as with Kambas now, there are some things that we do as Kambas that the other tribes, like the Luya people, don't like doing them. There is types of food we like eating, we as Kambas. You find that a certain tribe in somewhere doesn't like those types of food as we Kambas like. Yes. I don't think whether there is discrimination in race in Kenya.
When I was asking Judy about racial awareness, there was a big pause. There was a struggle in trying to figure out what exactly I was asking. And it became very apparent that it was because race is just not something that's perceived so much among her people where she is. And I'm aware of the idea that race and the way that we engage with it here in the United States is unique. But I wanted to know if there was even a perception of that for my guests. And like Olu, when Judy talks about her identity and who she is, it's all about the diversity of her tribe. Let's go back to the US and the UK. You might remember Mike Crenshaw from part 1. He's an artist, educator, and activist. He's from Chicago, Illinois, and he lives here in Portland, Oregon. He often talks about his elders and ancestors when sharing his stories with me.
Well, when I was a child, it's a trip to just talk about it, right? Because like when I talk, sometimes I hear my elder's voice in my own voice. So when I just now started to talk, I heard my grandfather's voice. I heard the people. I heard all those people in my own voice. I remember growing up, and when I was a kid in Chicago, and even when we moved back to Minnesota, we would come back to Chicago in the summers and on the holidays. We used to have family reunions, man. It would be the people who I've seen the most. I'd be familiar with them, and we would hug and they talk about how much I had grown, and we would eat the best barbecue together. And then there would be all the extended family, people I never met, or people who'd be like, you don't remember me? Because it would be people I met when I was a little baby, right? So that was my family environment. But my immediate family environment was, because you can't be with the extended family all the time, only on special occasions, was one of always moving, being isolated in new neighborhoods and new schools because the economic struggles, relative poverty of my early childhood meant that we moved around a lot. And in those environments, sometimes oftentimes I didn't fit in because I was always a new kid. So socially, I struggled a lot to figure out where my identity fit with the people in my peer group, in my neighborhood, in my school environment. Part of that experience for me was moving from all Black areas and Black neighborhoods and mostly Black schools into mostly white areas numerous times. And that began in my young consciousness. I began to develop, I guess, what could be called an identity crisis, in that I didn't know. I felt the need to fit in, and I would find myself trying to assimilate. But I didn't feel that I was around any social group long enough to be genuine. And I guess I felt like I had like an imposter syndrome is a word that I've heard, a term I've heard recently. So I know I'm saying a whole bunch, but all these things mattered in terms of what my walk is and what my walk was, because I had to struggle to figure out when I felt like the world wasn't letting me just be, then I had to figure out how to be.
I describe myself first before anything Ugandan, 100% Ugandan, because that's where I was born and raised for 19 years.
Rachel Bachabe is a fashion designer that we heard from in part 1. She's from Uganda, living in London. She and I connected deeply on the experience of moving to a country where society seems to push you into an identity box. How she perceives herself seems to have been challenged upon living in the UK and then again when returning home.
I also, because I've lived in the UK for the last 14, going on 15 years, because my birthday is soon, I would then also say I've started to see myself as a Black British African, obviously predominantly still reflecting on the fact that I am an African, but having moved here, I have really gotten to understand the culture, gotten to also have that confusion, because living here for the amount of 15 years, whenever I go back home, which I'm very blessed to be able to go back quite often, I tend to feel disconnected from my culture, not my family, but my culture, my people, because to them, they look at me as I've been in the UK, the accent has kind of changed, and they quote unquote call us Samas, which they mean like people who come from outside countries. So I think it's that dilemma that I'm now experiencing growing up in my adulthood, and making sure that I still firmly say, I am Ugandan, I know the dialects, I speak them, keeping in touch with my roots, which I recognize is very rare because not a lot of people have been blessed to keep in touch with their roots or have them speaking their language. So it's a complicated mash, but if you ask me, I'm Ugandan, always.
It sounds like despite the challenges when it comes to identity, she landed in an empowered place. Belén Ramirez is a student and community organizer from Lima, Peru. She goes to school in a more conservative area in Lima, and she says that her grandfather worked very hard to make a way for her to go to private school in this capital city. And this is an opportunity she wouldn't have if he hadn't done that work. She talks about these complexities, and they sound a lot like what we might recognize here as intersectionality. And that's the study of awareness of the overlapping or intersecting social identities and related systems of oppression and domination or discrimination. And if you want to know more about that, check the show notes.
Okay, yes. In Peru, there's like one common stereotype that if you are from the upper class society, you must have like white skin and like light hair, or you must like live in a huge house with a pool and with all that commodities. What I really face there is that my skin is not white. I have like a mixed skin, a tan skin, and this was my reality, because I have like different roots in myself. And in my school, many times I didn't have like real friends, like to say that, because people were really mean, not only to me, to other people too, that have like darker skin than them, and that didn't have like that same privilege. So yeah, there are many things I have faced during that period of time.
As a student, Belén already has a long list of volunteer and organizational work that is all centered on educating people and supporting them for a better future. It is quite impressive. She reflects on the groups that are here to help with similar problems in the United States.
Yes, like here we don't have like, I was researching about like the US and like all that type of organizations that you have like for African communities, for Asian communities and all that. Not many times, like there is a lot of misinformation here, and many people like don't give the importance that it needs to have. And that's something that is currently an issue here, because like many people could suffer of criticism about it, and they won't even like look at it because they are not aware of these issues, and they don't know how to treat them or how to take action about them. Many times I've been like looking at the TV and looking at the news, and you can see like people are treating bad like people from for their color. Like there is a term that is used like for classism to talk about indigenous people, that is like the word cholo. It was a historic word, like they will talk to them like that, and it was just to say like the term of the race that they have. But nowadays it's like said for criticism. They are currently saying that word to refer to a person that have indigenous race and do not have like that privilege of others. And yeah, they are like talking bad about them and all that and all that things that are really bad, and the government is not doing something for that. There are not like enough policies that are helping to be aware of them, and they are not like many times seen on TV. You can probably see about indigenous people that has been treated bad and all that, but African people not many times like appear that cases, and not because they do not exist, is because they do not give the importance that they need to have on the TV, but they really exist more cases about them.
Wow, that experience sounds so familiar. You know what else sounds familiar? Attention to the way we look and how that influences our identity internally and externally.
I've started gardening recently again. I think COVID was an opportunity to slow down. And quite often we take linguistics on the surface level of what it feels to us, our interpretation.
We're listening to Alain from Part 1. He's a transformative storyteller from the Philippines and St. Vincent, living in London. Alan and I took a detour on our conversation about identity and self-expression to talk about gardening, and then he put it all together in such a beautiful analogy.
When I think of roots, I think of plants, I think of trees, and roots are the unseen part. They're the part that's as deep as the plant is tall, and it enables that to grow. So growing up in British soil, I could identify as being Black British, but if you go into my roots, they reach across. I call myself a son of two sons, the son of the Caribbean, the West Indies, which raised my father, who came over when he was, I believe, in his late teens, to join his mother, and for them to be part of what would be considered the Windrush migration of Blacks from what was called the Empire, because Britain had colonized almost a third of the world. They called it the empire that the sun never set on. So I think a lot of my forebears identified as being part of the British Empire. So when the invitation came for them to make a life here, they migrated over. So that's part of my roots, being colonized, then feeling part of the colony, and coming over and beginning a new fight to be identified as Black and British and respected. On the other side, my mum, I suppose the roots go to the other side of the world, to Southeast Asia, where my mum's from the Philippines. And the Black gene is so strong. You know, I'm a melanated brother. You know, people think of me, they look at me and think I could be West African or Caribbean. But I'm proudly Filipino, even though when I went there as a child, about 11 years old, nobody looked like me. I was Michael Jordan and Michael Jackson to any and everyone who saw me, you know, when I was in the Philippines as a kid. But my grandparents accepted me. I was the second born, my sister's the elder, but we were the first grandchildren. And to be embraced by your native Filipino grandparents as one of theirs, it imprints on you. So I'm fiercely proud of being Filipino, even if I couldn't understand why I didn't look quote unquote Filipino. But there's a great documentary called Hidden Colors, a series of documentaries which I think you can find somehow, some way online through a stream. And here's the thing. Innocence is innocence is innocence as well. I always knew I'm Black. I always knew I was Filipino. I didn't understand why there would be some kind of contradiction. How can you be Black and Filipino? You don't look Filipino, you know. But in the documentary, there's a short moment where one of the historians explains that the first migration from Africa, where we're all from, going to Asia, the first place they landed was the Philippines. And like a missing piece of the puzzle, like my heart felt blessed. Like, I get it. I'm twice Black. You know, I went Black that way and I went Black that way, and I'm twice blessed. Look up the Aita people. I think it's AETA, and they look like me. They look like you. We've been everywhere. We were everywhere. So we're African, huh? But more recently, Filipino, Caribbean, and proudly Black and here in Britain.
What a beautiful testament to our family who truly is all over the world. And Elaine reminds us that there is also a rich history of how the challenges of being Afro people around the world affect us.
I didn't realize I only gave you like half the story, like the Filipino side, colorism and the whole thing about when I was out there, people trying to lighten their features, this hierarchy where the slimmer nose, the more Japanese style Spanish features were more favorable. And some of the broader nose, bigger lipped, Negroid features or Black features were considered to be at the bottom of that hierarchy, and a lot of the original Aita people kept their culture and kept their melanated identities because they fled cities, they lived in mountains, they were country or village or mountainous people. And, there's a lot to be said about challenging racism and colorism as being someone who is, identifies as half Filipino as well. So that's definitely there in the background. I do sense it sometimes that I am asking to be seen as Filipino in a way that I don't have to ask to be seen to be Black.
Andrea is our arts manager, singer, voice coach, and farmer from Trinidad, and she shared about this Caribbean nation's colorful history.
Well, it's very interesting. When I grew up, I grew up. Trinidad is a interesting place because obviously we were a colony that was fought over. Our last colonizers were British. In fact, when I was born in 1958, Trinidad and Tobago was still British. We got our independence in 1962.
She goes on to explain how there was different levels of housing, sometimes sequestered, and varied access to amenities and privileges. And to certain groups, the colonizers, the British in this case, they seemed to be in the best situations. And then there was demarcation for all the others from there. There seemed to be a lot of focus and systems put in place to keep people separate.
There was that, I suppose, when you look at it now, sort of apartheid in the sense that there was this separate, but we didn't call it that. We didn't necessarily see it at that. 1970 with the Black Power movement did a lot. Well, I mean, independence did a lot for us in terms of we took control of our destiny. 1970, the Black Power movement came to our shores. And that was, I think, the real kind of start of a consciousness among the people, in terms of their rights and the injustices that went with colonialism. The Trinidad is quite diverse. But saying so, there was that. When I grew up, my teachers were Black, my doctor was Black, my prime minister was Black, so people in power were Black. My parents did an amazing job in teaching us the value of everybody, no matter whether they were on the street or whether they're in highest office, in terms of giving value and respect to everybody. They did a fantastic job in that. And so in that transition, we grew up on the camp. There were white families still there. And then there were what we call the Trinidad white or the Creole families, those who were mixed ethnicity, but who were of a lighter color skin, the soft curly hair, etc., who, again, I suppose, tried to pass. They identified with their whiteness more than their Blackness. And there, you could sense the pretentiousness in the airs and that. So there was that. But I was grounded enough in my identity, and from a young age, to see these games being played, and I felt sorry for them. I felt sorry for them because I felt that they were kind of lost. The other thing about Trinidad is that we have two predominant races. Or I prefer to use the word ethnicities because I think we're one race. Two predominant ethnicities, and that is of East Indian and of African. And the history of that, obviously, the African side of it, as you know, the story 1492, Christopher Columbus came and said he discovered the West Indies, thinking it was the East Indies. And we have a calypso. In fact, I'm teaching this very thing now in a school, a private school with a few boys, and we're teaching this history, but through calypsos and poetry. One of the songs that the calypsos is Columbus Lied by one of our calypso names called Shadow, and they love it. Columbus lied, he said when he came, there was nobody, but he didn't tell anybody he had to run from the Apache,
We had to run from Apache. Columbus lied. Columbus lied. Columbus lied so bad. I believe Columbus was mad.
If you want to hear Andrea speak in detail about the complex history of Trinidad, please go to the podcast website. I have posted bigger chunks of all of the interviews there. And stay tuned to the end of this part 2 of the storybook, because I included a very commanding poem by Andrea called Cosmopolitanity.
He said unto Venezuela for another discovery. He said he discovered new lands, and he thought that I wouldn't know. He discovered a lot of Indians who discovered the lands before. Columbus lied. Columbus lied.
One thing that Andrea talked about a lot was history. And when I was in school, we weren't taught about roots. And for many of us, our family's roots were somewhat broken. We heard about our grandmothers and maybe our great-greats, but we weren't really engaged with our African roots as part of our very obvious history. So our history in school went a little something like this. Your ancestors were taken mostly from West Africa, and they were sold here in America to be slaves. We didn't even have the term enslaved people back then. Then there was a war, and the slaves fought with the white heroes and were freed by Abraham Lincoln, who's a hero. And for those who are into history, please look up what really happened there, and please look up the real story of Abraham Lincoln. Okay, so then there were some hardships, and they integrated into society pretty much after Jim Crow. Oh yeah, and there was that Rosa Parks thing, which, by the way, happened completely by chance. Rosa was just tired on the bus that day, and it all worked out, which, again, is not true. Please look it up. I know that now the history of our people, the African diaspora in the United States, has improved a little bit, but unfortunately there still is a lot of legislation that legally blocks the telling of our history in school, which again is bizarre and crazy. Either way, the little history that we do get, it's small and it's sad and it's inaccurate compared to the actual tremendous history of what we've accomplished and where we are from and who we are.
We believe that we all migrated from Ife. Every Yoruba person came from Ife in Osun State, Nigeria. So we believe in one central king that we think this is the Oni of Ife, who is supposed to be the lead of all the kings in Yoruba land. Every king is paramount in their town. But when we talk about where we came from, we believe that we came from Ife. Ife is a town in Osun State. And when you read further, you will hear people say we are from Upper Egypt, Upper Volta in Egypt. But within Nigeria, every Yoruba person believes that they migrated from Ife. That is our root.
That was Olu. Can you hear the conviction in her voice when she talks about her origins? Can you imagine if we all embodied an ancient history of our roots like this? I wish that feeling for all of us. What if we were in a setting where the generations coming up can connect back into their roots as far back as they please. What would that look like? How could we facilitate that? Maybe we would work with a griot. Kamala Diabate is a griot, musician and professor from Mali, now living in Maryland. A griot is a storyteller, a person who shares guidance and wisdom. They can draw on ancient histories and are the keepers of oral traditions and advisors to peoples in all parts of society. Kamala will share more with us in another part of the storybook, but for now, I just wanted to share a little bit of the experience of someone whose purpose and spiritual work is to keep people rooted in who they are. Sadly, I have to tell you that the sound connection was not the best in this interview, but I know you'll get the idea.
But the griot in Africa, let me explain to you a little bit. No griot, no books, no any history, because we don't have a pen, we don't have a book to write the history. But all this time, the griot they have the good memory to tell people about the history. So that's because the griot is very important to our society. Anywhere you go in the world, they told you about the griot.
Jake is about to show me the process, the spiritual skill of a griot who is storytelling history. He'll start to speak to me in one of the many languages he knows, and though we might not be able to understand the words, I invite you to imagine what it would be like to live in a society where you could go access someone who can share your own roots with you as far back as hundreds of years, just from hearing your name.
That's very important, because when you grow up the griot, we don't go to school to learn this. We learn from grandfather, father, the son. It's a very special. Like if you tell the history about our empire, Sunjata Keita, we don't go to school to learn, but we learn from our father, the family. You see, even here, when people do the rap comes from the griot family, but it's about education. Like me, I learned. We have 1 million family. If you tell me your name, your family name, I tell you from your ancestor to you. But I didn't go to school to learn that. I learned from my family. Like when you say the Empire of Mali, Sunjata Keita, his last name is Keita. We say Keita, Keita, Keita. Arema Mandinka. Takuma Kabala Simple. Tontan Jontan Woro, Kalafa Jonani, Tuba Jata Wali. For example, me, Sheikh Amala Jabate, my last name is Jabate Turamagan. When you say Turamagan, we say Turamagan Kankeja Moke Musoni Moke Dantma, Bamana Fatu Bako Masa, Bamana Jaku Bako Masa, Komuri Batramama Banyalo, Tambai Batramama Banyalo, Usirini Kasine, Kasine Sa, Tele Fabure, Taka Fabure, Mantafi, and Mantaje. That's my last name. And you say Kulubali. We have many million, I know everyone. You say Kulubali, Masasi, Sereni Allah, Tongoroni Baji, Kuya Sanjani Kuya Mamuru, Tangle Mula Kanike Sumasa, Koro Mamuru, and in Japan.
My chat with Jibori Abla Yvette went deeply into the internal perception we develop when it comes to race due to our experiences and culture around us. When I was experiencing so much turmoil around race moving to this country, I had a lot of doubts about my ability to fit in or belong or even really be comfortable. And I felt a lot of fatigue with the obsessiveness I was experiencing in this culture around race and the ignorance of the society around me. It took years to find peace. Yvette, who is a teacher, Vodun Priestess, and medium from Ghana living in Germany, shares about similar experiences.
I can say I'm trying hard, very hard, to see everyone as human. and not saying this is the white man and this is the black man and this is the yellow man. I'm trying hard because my spirituality don't accept discrimination, really. So I'm trying just to see everyone as human being. That's all. I was brought up like that to I was brought up to see differences in the races. I was brought up like that. But because I experienced this myself, that I experienced discrimination myself, even in my own home, and that is really funny. As I was saying before, my great-grandparents, both sides was Ghanaian. But just because of the colonialism, the one who stayed in Togo was discriminating the one in Ghana. And the one in Ghana was discriminating the one in Togo. I experienced that in my own home. Because my dad first married to a real Togolese woman, and then the second one was a Ghanaian, my mother. So every time you hear, that Ghanaian woman, you hear that from your own grandmother. Just because they stay at another border, that changed them. And it was not easy. When I grown up, that is where I accept myself completely as Ghanaian. I love Togo. And I will be in Togo, and I enjoy myself in Togo. But now I know that my real roots is from Ghana. You see, but that doesn't change anything for me right now. I love all those countries I told you. So I'm trying to put them together, show my children that we are all one. It's not easy because we are living in Europe, in Germany, where discrimination is the first thing they do if they see you as Black. If you go out every day, you experience discrimination, I can say 50% of your day was discrimination. So you come back home, and how do you explain that to your children? It's not easy. And then I have an adopted father who is German. We love him. But if we go out, the experiences we make sometimes affect our emotional relationship. And it was not easy for me or my family, my mom, my sisters and brothers. Just say we came here 7 children, and today I'm the only one in Germany. Because my sisters and brothers couldn't accept the discrimination in Germany. But what did I do? I'm a school teacher. So if I go to school, I explain children. I give education about Africa to children so that they will see us as human beings and equal. It's not easy. But I can say I have good experiences sometimes, especially at school, when school children think I'm Black, And every morning I take a plane to come to school from Africa to come to school. It's, I laugh about it, but I explain to the children how I'm here. I am living here. I'm not coming from Africa, or, questions like, do you even have toilet? Do you have food? There is a lot of questions. If you are not ready to accept your nest, you will be pissed off. You can't stand it. But I'm trying to stand that. It was not easy when I was young. I was in my teenage. It was for me like, I want to go back to Africa and I will never return back here again. But now I know, if people see me as you are seeing me like this.
She's referring to the fact that during our video chat, she's wearing a full African wrapped dress made of beautiful African lace and beads and a head wrap. It's not the typical streetwear of Germans where she lives.
I can go out. I know people ask me thousands of questions. Those who really bring conflict, like discrimination. But some ask, really, they want to know who you are. Why are you like this? They want to know. And if you are ready and you are open, you explain to them, then you earn some respect. That is very important. You have to know who you are open to. If the person comes to you disrespectfully, you cannot be open. But if you see people are interested, then open yourself and explain things to them. That is how we learn from each other. And not be in your community and say, I'm African, so I have to be in the African community. Only the African community. No, we should be open.
And that is very good wisdom right there. I know that towards the end of the hardest part of my journey when it came to race and self-identity was to stay open. And now I know it's very, very important for me to grow and to help those grow around me. We've come to the end of part 2 of the Afro Storybook, and I hope you were able to connect with some of what was shared about identity, culture, racial awareness. And remember that you do have a great big family with roots all over the world. But don't go yet, because today's part ends with a poem by Andrea Encinas.
Cosmopolitanity by Andrea Encinas. The Dilemma, Another Dimension. Yes, I know who I am, so I don't change my name. Massa's blood is as much a part of me. I am still the same. My mother suffered the pain. Slavery was to blame, but I refuse to bear the shame. Yes, I know who I am, so I don't move a place. Massa's birthright is as much mine as his. Let him get out of my face. My father died without a trace. Slavers hated my race, but I refuse to be displaced. Yes, I know who I am. You see me as black and singular. I see me as rich and plural. The color of the skin bears no resemblance to the dimensions of the mind. It's not a black or a white thing, though some keep it there. It's not even a shades of brown thing. Thin lips, thick lips, straight nose, broad nose, soft or natty hair. It's not a who I hang out with thing or a genetic disposition to eat food with or without seasoning, jellied eels, callaloo, fish and chips, fufu, curry, or stewed meat? Yes, I know who I am. And you see me as black and singular. I see me rich and plural. The color of the skin bears no resemblance to the dimensions of the mind. And whether I choose 42nd Street or Black Street, Van Gogh or Cabazon, white wine or white rum, Puccini or Quincy, Orisha or Christianity, UWI or Oxford University, I know who I am. You see me black and singular. I see me rich and plural. The color of the skin bears no resemblance to the dimensions of the mind. Yes, I know who I am. You see me black and singular. I see rich, plural. The color of my skin does not reflect the dimensions of my mind, so I don't change my name. Every part makes me the same, and I refuse to bear the shame.
Afro Storybook, collective wisdom and revelations from Africa and her diaspora. I'm your host, producer, and editor, Alexandra Loves, Aya Iwo-Riosa. You can find me at themoongardentemple.com or on IG at Tranquil Badassery. This is a production of the Moon Garden Temple and the Woke Wisdom Podcast. Please go to www.wokewisdompodcast.com or on IG, Woke Wisdom Podcast, to learn more about the storybook and my guests. My guests are Elaine Fusion Clapham, Judy Kalunga Kwavoile, Mike Crenshaw, Belin Ramirez, Jibori Abla Yvette, Chekamala Diabate, Rachel Bashabe, Andrea Sugar Black Encinas, and Olutosin Oladoshu Adeboale. Special thanks to the Portland Regional Arts Council for the initial funding of this project. And also special thanks to Seven Vision Studios for technical help and Quincy Davis for sharing his original compositions for the theme music and soundscaping for this storybook. Please consider supporting this project and future audio projects by subscribing to Woke Wisdom Podcast on Patreon. Thank you for listening and be blessed.